We've been talking to you, Congressman Eliot Engel, who is the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, a man very influential in determining our foreign policy. We've been talking somewhat in the Middle East. I want to take maybe one more area of the Middle East, and that's Israel and Egypt, if we can, and your thoughts on how we're faring with Israel. Israel has indicated that they will go it alone if they don't have the cooperation from us. Are you satisfied with the cooperation that we have?
Well, I'm satisfied. Prime Minister Netanyahu was just in the United States last week and spoke before the United Nations, but also came here in Washington, and he said that he had a very good meeting with President Obama. So I'm satisfied that our two countries are working very closely together, sharing a lot of things, working together. So I'm pleased with it. You know, Israel is protected day in and day out with the Iron Dome, which stops the bombs, the missiles that are coming in onto the civilian population, that stops them. That's being done with U.S. money. President Obama has been a very strong supporter of help with the Iron Dome. So I'm satisfied that we're working very, very closely. Now, Israel has always said that it's a sovereign country and it will ultimately determine its own moves and what it will or will not do, military and otherwise, and that's true of any country. But there is a tremendous amount of collaboration going on between Israel and the United States. And I think that U.S. and Israel right now are on the same page. But as Netanyahu always says, he's not going to ever rely on another country being the safeguard of Israel, that the Israel military will be the safeguards of their own freedom and security. And I think that those are words that are well taken. So I think that the relationship has been good. You know, Secretary Kerry has just started to reopen the peace talks between Israelis and the Palestinians.
Do you think, by the way, on that question, do you think it's possible?
Yes, I think it's possible. And I think that even if you think it's not possible, you always have to try. Because I do think peace is certainly better than no peace. And while I think that there are obviously a lot of obstacles to the peace, I think we have to try. I think that there were times that they were close. 2008 with Ehud Olmert, when he was prime minister, there was almost a deal within reach, but it didn't happen for a number of reasons. And I think that we really have to try. But you know, the Palestinians, Abba Eban used to say, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And they should take the opportunity. I mean, I do support a two-state solution. I think that is something that is good for Palestinians and also good for Israelis. It's complicated. There are lots and lots of opinions. But I think that there's one other thing that Netanyahu says, and I think it's very, very true. That is that ultimately, with any peace agreement, the Palestinians have to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, as a state for the Jewish people, as a homeland, national homeland for the Jewish people. It doesn't mean that only Jews can live there, but it means that it is the national homeland for the Jewish people, just the way there are many different Arab states that are homelands for the Arab people. When the original 1947 UN resolution was passed, which created a state of Israel, which partitioned into what was then historic Palestine into two states. And the resolution specifically said that it partitions Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Right away, when that was done, the Jews accepted it and formed the state of Israel. And the Palestinians, or the Arabs, rejected it and immediately attacked Israel and tried to drive Israel into the sea. And because of that, has never really accepted the notion of a Jewish state. I think that they have to do that. I also think it's important that Israelis and Palestinians sit face to face, like you and I are sitting, Lester, with no preconditions. Everything needs to be on the table. The problem is the Palestinians have put down so many preconditions, that is things that Israel must do before they'll even sit down and talk with them, that's obviously not conducive to getting a settlement. You know, they want Israel to agree to, ahead of time, negotiate on the basis of the 1967 lines, and they want all kinds of other things.
The right of return.
Right of return, releasing prisoners. Israel can't do that. Nobody can do that. If there's negotiations, you sit and negotiate. And the whole point of negotiations is that one side gives a little and the other side gives a little, and one side takes a little and the other side takes a little. It can't be unilaterally. You have to give everything up front before we'll even sit down and talk to you.
Right.
That obviously is not conducive to bargaining in good faith. But I'm hopeful. I know Secretary Kerry well. I know what he feels in his heart, and he feels it's a good feeling, and he feels that
he's made progress.
He's made progress. Now, of course, there are lots of other things going on in the Middle East that seem to have eclipsed the Palestinian-Israeli situation, and the old nonsense where some people used to say that if you just settle the Israeli-Palestinian problem, everything else would fall into place. We know that's not true. There are plenty of problems that have nothing to do with Israel or the Palestinians, and that, unfortunately, the Middle East is a volatile region. You mentioned Egypt before, so let me answer that. I think that the United States needs to continue its strategic relationship with Egypt. I don't agree with everything that the military has done. I certainly am opposed to the shooting of unarmed civilians. They've made some mistakes, but I think we have to work with them and put it in perspective. There are only two choices in Egypt. There's the military, and there's the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, we've already seen the Muslim Brotherhood, and we know what they're about, and I don't think that that's something that we feel very friendly toward. So I think with all the flaws of the Egyptian military, we have had close U.S.-Egyptian military-to-military cooperation now for nearly 40 years, and that's been a cornerstone of our Mideast policy. And I think that we need to continue that relationship. We need to nudge them towards civilian rule and nudge them towards democracy, but not to cut off things from them. And that's what was done, where announcement was made that we would withhold some of the helicopters and other things that we were going to send to them. I think that's a mistake.
The other part of it, and I want to get to another part of the world which is so important, and that is Asia today and our relationship. But the question is, are you consulted when moves like this are made? Has the committee been consulted?
Well, sometimes yes and sometimes no. Let's just say that this recent Egypt decision, the consultation was less than ideal, but most of the time there is consultation and we work closely together.
That's good. Going to another part of the world, going to Asia and China and our relationship there, how do you see it today?
Well, China obviously has become a superpower for a number of reasons. It's the most populous country in the world. Its economy is growing like crazy, and China is also very methodically been increasing its navy and its military and challenging the United States in many parts of the world, but certainly in Asia, where China is, for supremacy. I was in Asia with Chairman Royce. We took a joint trip back in January, and I can tell you every country we visited was very worried about what they perceive as Chinese aggression, Beijing aggression. I know we spoke with the leaders of Taiwan, in Japan, in the Philippines, in Korea, South Korea, and we didn't go to Vietnam, but the Vietnam leaders are even saying the same thing, that China has talked about the entire South China Sea as being its
and the island.
And right. And of course the Philippines and others see it differently, and I think the United States sees it differently. I also think it's very important that the United States keep its commitments. These countries are our allies, our commitments to Taiwan, our commitments to Japan and South Korea. I think it's very, very important that we do that. And when the President Obama mentioned about a pivot to Asia, I thought that was a good move. Asia is a very important part of the world. The problem is that we are so bogged down over time with the Middle East that it sort of stifles our ability to pivot anywhere else. Another part of the world, which when I was when the Democrats had the majority and I was chairman of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, which is Latin America and the Caribbean, and I've always felt that we neglect that part of the world, which is really our part of the world, the whole Western Hemisphere. So I would like to see us be able to do so much more all over the world, but it seems that obviously our hands are tied because the Middle East seems to be where we need most of our energy now.
As you logically point out, China is an important ingredient in our overall planning. How do you look? Taiwan is an old-time ally of the United States, and Taiwan is moving toward an accommodation of some sort with China. How do you look at this? And this occurs, by the way, our discussion occurs on the day that is Taiwan's National Day, interestingly enough.
Well, I think that the people of Taiwan will obviously decide for themselves what their relationship with mainland China should be. And that's a very obviously delicate situation. I do know, though, that one of the things that deters the Beijing government from being more aggressive to Taiwan is the fact that the United States is there. We have the Taiwan Relations Act with Taiwan. Look, both places are there and they're in close proximity to each other, and I think that they have to coexist. How they coexist is up to the people of China and the people of Taiwan, but what I don't want to see is the people of the government of China imposing its will on the people of Taiwan. I think the people of Taiwan have the same right to determine their future as other countries do. I know China feels that Taiwan is an integral part of China, but if you look at the Taiwan economy, I think they're about 20th largest in the world, which is a tremendous feat for a small island. And when you go to Taiwan, I know you've been there many times. I mean, when I go there, I'm amazed at what has been accomplished. But I think that the Taiwanese people know that China is there, and I think there has to be some kind of accommodation. And I think both of them, there's more to gain on both sides with some kind of an accommodation than there is with hostility.
Eliot, I want to do one thing. I want to get to home. We've taken you all over the world. Now let's.
It's fun to travel. What can I tell you, Lester?
Actually, we're in the midst of the shutdown here that we're doing this. How do you feel this thing's going to be ironed out?
I think it'll be ironed out, and I think it'll be ironed out within the next week or so. I think the president's handled this very, very well. I think the president is quite correct when he said that there will be no negotiation over the debt ceiling or the shutdown of the government in terms of them holding a gun to his head.
Well, we have always had it's traditional that you cannot legislate on an appropriations bill.
Very
the
true.
House cannot.
Very true.
And that's what's happening.
Well, that's true, and they're trying to force you know the Affordable Health Care Act, or they like to call it Obamacare. It was passed by the Congress. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. There was a presidential election in 2012 where that was one of the leading issues, and Obama was reelected. So they ought to get off of it already. It's like mixing apples with oranges. Trying to defund Obamacare or kill it or whatever or delay it has nothing to do with the issue of keeping the government open or allowing the United States to pay its bills. And the president is right to say that he won't negotiate on that kind of tit for tat. He will negotiate if they agree to keep the government open and we agree to pay the full faith and credit of the United States, then he's happy to negotiate. He said this to us at the White House yesterday.
And he's going to be president for another couple of years, isn't he?
3 years. 3 years.
So that, I mean, this situation will develop in time and hooefully will come about a resolution.
Well, it has to, because I don't think, I think Boehner has boxed himself into a corner, and you've got this minority in his caucus, the Tea Party minority. Maybe it's 36 or so people, and they're boxing him because if they withdraw their support, he doesn't have a majority of the House. He'd have to then go over to Democrats,
right,
which is a no-no for a Republican speaker. So they really have him, and I think the resentment is palpable, and I also think that we're going to have an end to the crisis because the Republicans' friends, their rich friends, Wall Street or whatever it is, they don't like this. This has the potential for really hurting our government, hurting the economy. And I think they're going to start breathing down the necks of the Republicans. I think Boehner's caught in a box into a corner, and Obama will have to let him out, but not based on what Boehner wants to do.
You know, the conversation is so interesting to me. I would love to continue it and go on and on. Your breadth of knowledge of the world today is really amazing for me.
Well, thank you. And
I want to thank you very much for appearing with us here on Ask Congress once again. And I'd like to just reinforce the idea that people now can contact congressmen throughout the world through askcongress.net. Again, our thanks to you for coming on here today, and hopefully you'll come back again soon.
Well, thank you, Lester. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. We were talking a little bit before about how you served on the Foreign Affairs Committee when you were in Congress, so it's really an honor to serve on that committee.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now until next week at the same time, this is Lester Wolff from Washington.